Your Legislators is made possible in part by the generous financial support of MAPE members, making Minnesota clean waters, safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans. Minnesota Farmers Union, committed to helping develop and strengthen Minnesota rural communities since 1929. On the web at mfu.org. Live from St. Paul, Minnesota, we welcome you to another season of Your Legislators, a roundtable discussion featuring state lawmakers who are prepared to answer your questions and discuss important issues affecting citizens of Minnesota. Now, here's your moderator for tonight's program, Barry Anderson.
Good evening and welcome to this week's version of Your Legislators. We're heading into the stretch drive, heading toward adjournment at the end of this month, and we'll have some discussion about that. I want to thank you for joining our program as we once again engage in a roundtable discussion about the issues that are important to Minnesotans. I promised you last week that we'd arrived at the end of winter. I'm promising you that again this week, and I'm going to keep repeating that until it's true. So we're hoping any week now that will be the case. But regardless of what the weather's like, we're going to have some great conversation here, and we want to invite you to be a part of that. So we encourage you to send in your questions via the electronic instructions on your screen. We'll take them via email and by telephone, and we're going to see that they get to our panel who will help us unravel the mysteries of St. Paul. We begin this program this week, as we do each week, by introducing that distinguished panel of guests. And of the three panelists that we have so far, our fourth panelist may be at a conference committee and may join us a little bit later. But of the three panelists we have tonight, two of them are new to our viewers, and we're going to introduce them to you this evening. Let's begin to my immediate left from District 14B, St. Cloud, Representative Zachary Dorholt. Did I pronounce that right?
You got it.
All right, very good. Tell our viewers a little bit about yourself. You are, as I understand it, a freshman serving in your first term in the legislature, and tell our viewers a little bit about what it is you do when you're not in the legislature, the committees you serve on, things of that sort.
Sure. As mentioned, a freshman. I represent about half of St. Cloud as well as Minden and Haven Township. My day job, I'm a counselor at the Central Minnesota Mental Health Center, and I work in a day treatment program for adults who live with serious and persistent mental illness. I do a little job placement, counseling, a lot of community integration. I'm also part owner of a small bar and restaurant, just kind of opened up last summer in Sauk Rapids as well. I'm currently serving as Vice Chair of Higher Ed. My district is home to St. Cloud State University as well as St. Cloud Tech and Community College. And I'm on government operations and transportation policy.
All right, very good. Also joining us, who's been with us before in the past, District 2 from Clearbrook, Senator Rod Skoy. And I pronounced that right. We checked that earlier. So
absolutely, Barry, but I've answered to a lot of four-letter words.
Well, see, yes, the nature of the beast, I'm afraid, right?
Yes, that's right.
Tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm Rod Skoy, a farmer from Clearbrook, Minnesota. I have the honor of serving in the Minnesota Senate, representing Senate District 2. Serving on the as chair of tax committee this term. Also have service on the reform division, which has had a really interesting year this year, looking at the reform of our tax system. Serve on environment, ag, and economic development, kind of the commonly called the Hogs, Frogs, and Jobs Committee. And then I serve on the Rules Committee, which is the administrative committee for the Minnesota Senate.
Just to get the geography clear here, your Senate district must be one of the larger ones in Minnesota. Am I right about that?
Yeah, pretty large swath of north central northern Minnesota. It goes from the chimney of the state down to south of Park Rapids, over toward Detroit Lakes, includes Lake Park, Audubon, and big chunk of ground. My largest community is Park Rapids, 3,200 people, so real good rural district, which fits me real well, and a lot of timber and farms and agriculture and tourism. So
driving distance from one corner to another is what?
Oh, it's well over 150 miles. It's a long stretch across the district.
Also joining us for the first time, Senator Bill Weber from District 22, Laverne. You also would have a pretty large district, I would guess.
That's correct, Barry. And again, thank you for having me here tonight. I represent all or parts of 9 counties in southwest Minnesota. We have about 72 miles of border with South Dakota and 60 miles of border with Iowa. And And so we have 6 complete counties and parts of 3 other ones. And I'm native of Rock County and grew up on a farm 8 miles southwest of Laverne, graduated from Laverne High School. And I am now the owner of Jensen Management Service, which is a real estate brokerage, appraisal, and management firm in Laverne. I also spent 16 years in local government, 8 years on the city council, 8 years as mayor, and was very heavily involved as a hospital board member on the economic development authority, planning and zoning, and a number of other committees. I've also been heavily involved in politics. Was county chairman and finance chairman for many years for the Rock County Republican Party. And this last election, I was elected to take over the seat of retiring State Senator Doug Magnus from Slayton.
And you're serving on a variety of committees and so forth. Tell our viewers a little bit about that.
I am. I'm on 4 committees this year on policy. I am on environment and energy, and then jobs, ag, and rural development. And then in finance, I'm on education, E12 finance, as well as environment, economic development, and ag.
All right, well, let's jump right into some of the questions from our viewers. We have one from Canby. A viewer wants to know about whether or not there's going to be any increases in compensation for caregivers who work with the disabled. This viewer is concerned, indicating that there have been relatively few adjustments in wages for these individuals, and thinks that perhaps something should be done about that this time. Who wants to take a run at that? Anybody? Should we start with you?
Sure.
Field you may know a little bit about, given you're working with a fragile population there. So.
Yeah, well, I think these folks had a rally at the Capitol today, if I'm not mistaken, and sounds like some of them are making a hard ask for a good 5%. Mm-hmm. From what I think, we now have about 2% on the House side, in that increase, and a lot of us would like to go bigger, because the problem here is these care providers, the turnover rate in the staff is constant. You're not able to keep good employees around because the pay isn't where it needs to be to provide good care. So I think right now that's the House. I'd like to go a little bigger with that increase, but we're working in a biennium here, and I'm part of a group that's been pushing for a larger increase as well.
Senator Skoye?
Sure. Well, we'd like to be able to say that we were going to give reasonable cost of living adjustment to workers across the state. I don't know if we'll accomplish that or not this session, but in the long term, what I think we need to do with regard to long-term care and other care facilities is we need to figure out to reinstitute the rebasing program we had. The rebasing program is so that we would go in and revisit what the actual costs of providing the services are and redo the reimbursement to be reflective of the costs that the facilities are incurring. That would impact nursing homes as long-term care facilities, but other long-term care facilities that deal with people who have needs across the state. And so what I've been working on is trying to get the rebasing instituted. I think there's a small provision in the Senate bill that's going to be moving through the conference committee process. Hopefully they're able to hang on to that. But, in the future, it's really what we're going to have to do. It does have costs associated with it. But for our rural long-term care facilities, it really has to happen. When you look at the financial shape of these facilities, the majority of them are operating in a negative position. Now they're running on their reserves if they have any of them left. And with the demographics as they are in the state, it kind of behooves us to make sure that those facilities are financially strong. So we're going to have to do something to deal with that as the baby boom generation ages and there's more needs for long-term care facilities.
If I'm reading the viewer from Canby's question correctly, this viewer is suggesting that the Senate bill as currently proposed has no pay increase for workers, or it has it maybe on the last year of the biennium. Mm-hmm. And maybe you could clarify exactly where the Senate's at on that question.
Well, I'm not going to have detailed information on the actual pay increase. I do know that in the long run, for these facilities' financial stability, we have to do the rebasing, and I know that Senator Laurie was making that a priority of his. Now, if he includes a small pay increase in the second year of the biennium, that might be there.
That's what our viewer is suggesting as I read the question. So. Senator Weber?
Well, thank you. Yes. As I recall the debate on the HHS bill, there is a small increase in the second year of the biennium. I'm one of the authors on the Senate side of the legislation to have given the 5 and 5 for our nursing home and community service provider employees. And some may think, well, gee, that's, in today's economy, that's a fairly stiff raise. But we also have to remember that many of these people haven't had any type of a substantive raise for 5, 6, or more years. And there was, I think, in the last biennium, there was a small increase that had been given for what we call the really deep rural facilities. And I think I think we're somewhat disappointed from the standpoint that as we look at the total amount of increase in the state's spending that's going to occur in this next biennium, that there wasn't the availability of those funds for that group of people. You need to have a good salary in order to keep and maintain your trained and good personnel. And it's not that we don't have good personnel out there. My mother wound up being admitted to our local nursing home the day before I got sworn into office. Mm-hmm. And, and I have seen these people work, and they work out of a dedication and love for the residents that they're taking care of. And I can't say enough good things about what I have witnessed. And we just need to respond better to their needs here in the very near future.
And if I could add one thing, Barry, one of the things when you look at these small communities in rural Minnesota, many times the long-term care facility, if it's not the largest employer, it's the second largest employer. So we're providing good services to the people that live there as they need long-term care. But it's also employment, and many times with that employment, it's the health insurance. I've had a number of facilities close in my Senate district because they're struggling financially, and when those people lose their jobs, those families also lose health insurance. So it's a real economic impact in these small towns. So it's the services that we're providing to the people that need the long-term care, it's the jobs, and health insurance for Minnesota families that are at risk when we don't have financially stable institutions.
Interesting question from a viewer that we have not had previously. This viewer wants to know about taxing nonprofits that provide fee-for-service. This viewer is concerned that it's an unfair advantage to tax-paying businesses in the same field. Also concerned about state subsidization of nonprofits in that context. I assume the viewer might be talking about property taxes, but I don't know. Has this question come up? I'm going to look at you, Senator Skoye.
Well, there was a case in Rochester, a daycare over the rainbow, I believe, a couple of years ago, where there was a question about whether they were actually being a nonprofit. And nonprofits are tax exempt under Minnesota law. So if a nonprofit is providing a true nonprofit, they are tax exempt for property tax. Mm-hmm. One of the issues that we are debating with regard to nonprofits this year is there's an effort by some communities to move away from the property tax for doing like road repair. Here in St. Paul, they have a street light assessment, and they go to these assessment mechanisms. Now, sometimes those could fall on the nonprofit. In the current street maintenance proposal that's in the Senate, and I think in the House, the nonprofits would be exempt from that also. But they are as nonprofits tax exempt from property tax and other taxes also.
And is there any plan? I think this viewer is concerned about whether or not there's any plan to change that. I gather that this is not one of the tax reform proposals that's being floated at this point. No,
the only area where there would be a concern was with this assessment mechanism, and in the Senate bill and I think in the House bill, the nonprofits are exempt from those assessments that they're being discussed. For myself personally, I'm not a huge fan of those assessment mechanisms. I've always thought that the property tax was the appropriate mechanism for funding those programs, but other legislators have other ideas.
Well, I suppose we should ask our former mayor here, what do you think of this? And Senator Weber, what's your thought on this question?
Well, I recognize that obviously a lot of my cities have petitioned me to go ahead and support this type of a process. process, and I quite frankly have some mixed feelings about it. I understand, in terms of city funding, that there are times that they obviously run short as well. I'm also concerned, however, that we start to have so many of these different types of funds out there that all of a sudden we aren't really getting a true and clear picture of what the real taxing burden is on the people of our communities, and so I do have mixed feelings about that issue.
Yeah, well, this issue really came to me this session. The city of Bemidji, which provides fire service to the townships on the north side of Bemidji, actually wanted to build a fire station outside their city limits, which they wouldn't be allowed to do unless they had a fire district. So they were proposing to develop a fire district and assess for fire services. Well, the question I asked, well, what are you going to do about BSU, the college? Because then would the college have to pay that assessment or not? And so as we started to delve into this, we found that state buildings aren't being uniformly dealt with across the state. They are paying assessment in some jurisdictions the state not paying the assessment. So we're actually trying to bring some uniformity to that this year in this conference committee that we're working on now.
Representative, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that the question might be referring to the street improvement districts, which I believe Representative Earhart carried in the House, and as people were talking, the nonprofits were very concerned about that, and they were now exempt from the piece that made it into the House bill.
All right, stay tuned is kind of the story there, right? All right, now a viewer from Glenwood wants to know, what's the hang-up with the legacy bill? So who wants to talk about the legacy issues and whatever's going on there? Should we start with you, Senator Weber?
Well, at this point in time, I don't know that I can honestly answer that question. But certainly we had a hearing this week in environment and economic development and ag, and that, of course, that was on the Lessard Sams monies and that type of thing, and that part of that process. And right now, actually, there's still been hearings this week on the different elements of money and projects to be funded out of those. But I have to be totally honest with you. I'm unclear in my mind as how that bill is getting put together at this point.
Senators?
Well, I think the controversy is surrounding around Representative Kahn, and if we're going to do the funding on a biennial basis or an annual basis. I think she followed the recommendations of the councils on an annual basis, but then there was proposals to make some changes in the second year. I think traditionally we've done an annual appropriation on these things, so that's the change.
Traditionally we've done a biennial.
No, for the legacy they've done it every year.
Okay.
And I think in the Senate, and I serve on the committee with Bill, and my expectations is that we're going to track pretty closely with the recommendations of the councils. I'm not going to say there aren't going to be some changes, but I think we'll try to do an annual appropriation as we had in the past and follow pretty close with what the councils are recommending.
Representative Dorholt, legacy bill, what's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are there's too many good things in there for it to get hung up too long, and I know Central Minnesota's got some great projects, and I'm looking forward to getting it moved, but I think we hit on why it's kind of stalled.
And the other thing that's going on there is there's a lot of issues revolving around water in the state of Minnesota, and the Clean Water Council recommendations, and are we going to be able to utilize some of those dollars to do well testing and other things that impact water quality and water quantity in the state of Minnesota?
Well, we have a viewer from Forest Lake who says, I don't understand the proposed beer tax. Advocates say it's 7 cents per beer. Brewers say it's closer to $7, slight exaggeration, he says, or would put them out of business completely. Somebody explain this to me. Help. So who wants to explain what's going on with the beer tax?
I would say since it's in the House tax bill, we should let the House explain that, don't you?
All right. It's a vote 2-0, Representative Dorholt. They're looking to you to explain what's going on with the beer tax.
Well, and so viewers understand, of course, this was part of the House tax omnibus tax bill, and it is an excise tax, so that 7 cents is distributor to the brewer, and if it's implemented, I know the Senate doesn't seem to be a fan of it. The governor's not a fan of it. So if they're not a fan of it, call the governor and let them know that's part of the omnibus bill you're not supportive of. But those costs, I'll be honest with you, I'm part owner of a bar and restaurant, and those costs will be passed down. So it's 7 cents from, say, the distributor to the brewer, but that's that first 7 cents, and that averages out to be about 7 cents per drink. But by the time it filters through the middlemen and everybody makes their adjustments, and by adjustments, a lot of it's profits. Mm-hmm. It could cost some of the larger companies, such as Budweiser, to be about $3 more per case. And they're the ones who are most concerned, because the way it's structured could kind of even out the cost of a case of Budweiser versus a case of Northeast or something that's a smaller brewery.
And Shells from New Ulm.
There you go, Shells from New Ulm, or 3rd Street in Cold Spring. And so the
way to look out for your district. I noticed that.
Neighbors, but
right.
The big brewers are very concerned that the growing market of the craft beer industry is growing fast and large, and they're catching up. So yeah, the 7 cents initially, but as it does filter down, for example, if we charge $5.50 for a glass of beer, it costs probably go up to $5.75 at the. And some people, of course, are blowing out of proportion. But yes, if it's passed, it'll cost consumers of alcohol, anywhere from, like I said, about a quarter on a glass at the tap, or up to $3 a case more in the liquor store.
And that has passed. It's in the House bill and has passed out of the House.
Correct.
All right, Senator Scully, what's going on the Senate side?
Well, the Senate didn't include alcohol tax in our tax bill. We are going to be discussing this in the conference committee in the coming days. Just kind of as a broader view of the taxation, though, I think that all of the parties, the House, the Senate, and the governor, have some form of a cigarette tax, primarily because of the health impacts of trying to encourage people to quit smoking and trying to figure out to not have our young people start smoking. So we've taken that step. I believe that's going to become, one of those proposals will become law. That's a regressive tax. And so if we were to start adding the alcohol tax on top of the cigarette tax, I think we would be moving our tax system away from progressive and toward a more regressive tax system. I haven't been supportive of the alcohol tax. I think the Senate's going to resist that in the conference committee. But, we kind of trying to operate on a tax philosophy of taxes should be related to one's ability to pay, which would make them more progressive, kind of lend toward the income tax area, and stay away from the more regressive taxes, the alcohol tax. So that's my kind of broader view on it. The details of the alcohol tax, I don't know if it's going to be a dime a drink or 7 cents, but it is a regressive tax.
Senator Weber, your thoughts?
Well, another aspect of it is being a border district, and in the city of Luverne, we're 30 miles from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and you get to the east end of my district, they're probably 30, 40 miles from Spirit Lake, Iowa. And as you look at these issues, what my people and my store owners are really concerned about is that what you're going to do is start shipping even more people across the border to buy. And there's a fair amount of spirits and beer bought in South Dakota already due to the difference in the tax structure. And if you add to that, you're going to see even more go. And obviously, if people are across the border and they're going into those stores and they're driving by all these other stores, they buy a lot of other things while they're over there as well. And so it is a real concern for my operators and my distributors in my area, because this will definitely, if this passes, it will definitely put them at a disadvantage with their out-of-state competitors.
Joining us is Representative Bud Nornis from Fergus Falls. Representative Nornis, thanks for joining us this evening.
Glad to be here. Got tied up in traffic. No, I really didn't.
Got tied up in the
got lost in downtown St. Paul.
Yeah, you got tied up in the people's business is what happened.
We were working very hard on the unionization of child care today.
All right.
In Ways and Means, just concluded a few minutes ago.
Well, maybe do you have some news to report to us as to what the conclusion was?
Well, after quite a long discussion, it did pass out through the Ways and Means Committee. A close vote. And it's personal child care providers and child care. They're both combined in that bill in the House.
And what is the status of that bill in the Senate? Maybe I should ask you, Senator Skoye.
I think it's going to be on the Senate floor. There's some discussion about, this is a bill that would allow people to vote to whether they're going to unionize personal care attendants or daycare providers. There's some discussion about the level that you have to have supporting in order to even bring it to a ballot, whether that should be 30% or a lower number. Consistent with PELRA would require 30% of the people potentially being served to be involved in petitioning for a ballot. And so we'll see where that ends up. If it gets I think if it drops below that number, the support tends to diminish for that. And at this point, the way I understand the bill is it's a mechanism going into place where people can vote as a group if they decide they wanted to be in a union or not. And the two groups that are being impacted are personal care attendants and daycare workers.
I think the threshold in the House is 10%.
It's 10. See, that's the discussion that's going on right now. And I personally think 10% is too low. We need to be consistent with the PELRA, which is at 30%.
Senator Weber, your thoughts?
Well, certainly, number one, just let me state, so there's no question, I would be against the bill, regardless of the percentage. I've had a lot of contact on this bill, and by and large, the actual daycare providers themselves are against it in my district. They do not want anything to do with that. They don't feel it is right that this should even be discussed. They are private businesses, private entrepreneurs, but there also have been stipulations talked about that if they aren't part of the union, that then if there are some the state subsidies are going to be affected by that, and
this would be that so-called fair share provision.
And there is a real concern about the fairness issue in this whole situation.
And I think that's a valid concern. You have to try to figure out. Because if they're going to include from some of the proposals or the proposal that's out there now, if they're going to be part of the sliding fee child care benefit that some child care providers get, they would have to be either in the union or be a fair share union dues kind of payer. And that's questionable as to the validity of that. I think that they're trying to figure all that stuff out. And to be honest, I've been a little busy on other issues right now, so I haven't tracked that quite as much, but we did have some discussion today about it, so I have that much knowledge about it.
I would just add, in my district, I haven't heard from the personal care providers that much, but the child care providers, to a person, they're all opposed to it. Yeah. And to me, it's hard to bring forward something where you have that much opposition. I mean, even if you really want to do it, you're forcing people to do something they're not very happy about. So,
yeah, of course, they can always vote no. I mean, that's then nothing.
For those that can vote, not all of them will be able to vote. If they're not taking the CCAP dollars or whatever they're referring to, the subsidy dollars.
Yeah, but if they're not taking the CCAP dollars, it wouldn't impact them.
That's correct. Yeah, they would not be voting, and they would not be a part of it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Representative Dorholt, we didn't mean to ignore you. What do you think about this issue?
I guess my district's a little bit different. I've had a lot of people in my district who have been supportive of it. I know it's been kind of a hot button for some areas, but for myself, bottom line, I can't say no to allowing a vote. That's which kind of comes down to it.
We have a viewer from Little Falls who wants to talk about the dogs and body grip traps and wants to know whether there's anything going on that issue. Who wants to take a run at that question? Should we start with you, Representative Martinez?
I know nothing.
Okay, that.
All right.
Anybody else?
Well, there has been in the past an effort to try to regulate some of these. They're called conibear traps. Try to get them 5 feet up off the ground. I think there was an issue where somebody's hunting dog got caught in one of those a number of years ago, but I haven't heard it as an issue this year. It wasn't in the Environment Finance at all.
No, it wasn't any bills that I've seen. So
I've had some inquiries, from the public. But again, I agree. I haven't seen anything around the Capitol dealing with that.
Any other thoughts? Let's move on. Viewer from Pipestone, it's kind of like an auction. You speak quickly or we're just going to move right ahead. Viewer from Pipestone, I'm going to pick on you, Senator Weber. Viewer from Pipestone says, why doesn't Minnesota make the 5 counties bordering South Dakota tax-free or industrial? This viewer is concerned about industrial-free zones to try to keep more jobs in the state. And I think the viewer is concerned about the bleed over to South Dakota. So anyway, Senator Weber, what do you think of that?
Well, certainly we have had in the past, there's been certain programs in the state that have tried to deal with these factors. Most recent one is probably Job Z that was created. Then there was also border city legislation back when I was mayor to have a special designation and some special tax advantages. And quite frankly, they've had a mixture of results, and so there have been some successes with that, and there have been some things that haven't been quite so successful. But certainly, I think what we need to really be concerned about is having a fair playing field for all business in the state of Minnesota. It has been really difficult for us as border communities. We had 2 homegrown businesses. We had the old Laverne Bumper Company and Laverne Fire Apparatus, and it became Laverne Truck Equipment and Laverne Fire Equipment. And they combined, they came under one ownership, and combined they had 60 to 80 jobs in Laverne, and they grew to 200 to 250 jobs. The unfortunate thing is that growth occurred in Brandon, South Dakota. And this is going back into the days when we had even more serious workers' comp issues, unemployment insurance issues. And I was with the Rock County Development Corporation. We tried to put together a package at that time to help them stay in Laverne, and they really appreciated our efforts. At that time, they told us, the problem is that 10 years over there, the savings in workers' comp and unemployment will pay for the new building. And today's economy, the mobility of it and what have you, we used to think about businesses traveling 20, 30 miles to get across the border. Well, the truth of the matter is there's a cost to moving. But once you get everything up and on the truck, whether you go 20 miles or you go 200 miles, it doesn't necessarily add that much extra to the cost. And so I think it's a concern for all business in Minnesota. And we are at a competitive disadvantage in the entire tax structure. And we are going to have to deal with that because I think I haven't seen the announcement, but there was the closing of some paper jobs up in northern Minnesota announced, I believe, yesterday, today, or it's coming up shortly. And so this is a real issue, and this is going to continue to be a real problem until we come to grips with the differences in our taxing structure.
Senator Skoye, your thoughts on this?
Well, there are definitely concerns on the borders, and as Bill mentioned, we have had initiatives in the past to try to help deal with them. In this tax bill, we're trying to focus in on some of the greater Minnesota businesses that we have, and as opposed to maybe moving businesses around within the state, we're trying to come up with a way to encourage the businesses that are currently located in our communities to expand and grow in Minnesota. I think a lot of the rural businesses, and many of them in my neck of the woods anyway, they tend to be people who grew up in that town, start a small business, grow and expand, and Marvin Windows and Polaris and Arctic and Team Industries, and you can kind of name that group. Those individuals all grew up in that town, so we're going to put a tax credit into place and try to do some sales tax exemptions for their building construction materials to encourage them to do what happened in Laverne to grow and expand here. But generally, and I know the border communities, particularly in North Dakota now with the Bakken oil fields, it's tough competition there against those North Dakota folks. But generally, Minnesota has been doing pretty well competitively. Our population is growing faster, our unemployment rates are lower, our per capita income is higher. So we've been competing. We have to continue to pay attention to it. We have to be cognizant that, as Bill mentioned, now in this digital age, people can move easier than it used to be, and so we're going to pay attention to that and try to keep Minnesota competitive. But it's ongoing. It's an ongoing effort. It's not going to be something you can just, like the Job Z program was a 10 or a 12-year program. Well, that's come to an end, so we have to find some other thing to encourage rural job development.
Representative Nornes?
Well, I'm thinking of a specific business right now in my community, and the owner has told me the best thing that Minnesota can do for him is to get out of his way. get the government to go away. Basically, they're more of an obstacle than they are a help as far as he's concerned. And most recently, he had to spend, I don't remember the dollar amount, but it was a lot of money just to cover where they put their trash. You know, they had to do something very expensive to meet a requirement that the state put on them, and that's not the first time. And this is a company that competes with China. You know, so they have their good days, they have their good months, they have their bad months. I mean, it's a battle. And then the state comes along and really doesn't help the situation very much. Speaking of the border, I've been told that the governor of South Dakota is either coming or has been here personally to talk to our industries and to talk to employees. They don't have enough population over there. They get a lot of jobs. Look at Sioux Falls. And then you look at Fargo. I mean, those towns are growing. It should tell us something. But the governor of South Dakota is coming to Minnesota specifically to do more to take away from what we have here and lure them over there. That's pretty aggressive. I don't see our governor going to South Dakota to bring business over here or anyplace else. I think that's a little extreme, but it's that's the competition we're looking at.
Representative Dorholt, your
Well,
thoughts?
I am reminded of something Governor Dayton keeps saying is when he was with Department with DEED or Economic Development back in the 70s, people were saying the same thing in all the states. Oh, we're going to move to North Dakota. Oh, we're going to move to Iowa and all that. But I would ask this questioner to look at the House tax bill because we do have a specific provision that is for border cities in there to spur some economic development and encourage those companies here. It doesn't, not specifically counties, but it does address some of the border cities. So there is some good provisions in the House tax bill in that one.
I tried to actually add Fergus Falls to the border cities because we're only 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
I mean, we're very close. We're as competitive with North Dakota as Breckenridge is.
I would say so.
You know, we have people going back and forth to work and so forth, and we have a fellow that lives in Breckenridge or Wahpeton Metro, and he has a business in Fergus Falls. So it works both ways. But we were just trying to protect our interests a little bit, and of course that fell flat. Didn't go anywhere. So,
if I might add to
please.
that, I think we oftentimes too we talk about the business development and the tax issue is very important and it is a major element. But we also have to understand that there are other elements out there that the state influences in terms of businesses' decisions, whether it's our existing businesses to expand here, whether it's new businesses to come in, and you know we have local businesses that are loyal to their communities and we appreciate them, but I don't know that we can adequately, I don't think there's any way we can adequately estimate how many jobs have we not even been considered for. In other words, how many businesses have not even bothered in looking at Minnesota as they look at their expansion plans? And now, you know, shortly there's going to be a bill that's going to come to the floor in the Senate that you know out of Environment and Energy that's going to include a solar mandate. And yes, there has been many different groups taken out of that solar mandate, municipals and co-ops and certain large users and that type of thing. But our investor-owned utilities are still going to have a mandate scaled down, granted, and appreciate that from what it originally was proposed to be. But there's still estimates out there that are in the neighborhood of $1 billion cost by the time you put all these things together. $1 billion cost, which is, quite frankly, is just going to be spread out where? To its ratepayers. That's going to be residential people. That's going to be small industrial and commercial operations. And so when you start compounding all these issues, you know, we have to be taking a look at our business development in every element that we consider here in the legislature. And taxes are important, but so are all these other areas in which we are starting to put additional costs on the backs of ratepayers who are also our taxpayers.
No, absolutely. Other things are very important, like the quality of the workforce and other things. And I look at the major business expansions that are proposing to come to Minnesota in the next year or so. 3M is going to redevelop their R&D facility in Maplewood. It's going to commit to Minnesota for another number of decades. Major commitment to keep R&D in Minnesota. We've got a pharmaceutical company that's looking to locate in Brooklyn Park. Emerson's going to locate in Shakopee, bringing a number of jobs there. The Mall of America is expanding, so we've got a good retail presence going on there. A really good long-term economic outlook for Minnesota. And then, of course, the Rochester development going on with our state's largest private employer. And, here's a really interesting situation where you've got a business and a community asking to raise the taxes on themselves so that they can grow as fast as their corporate host, their company that they're hosting. And it's really exciting. There's going to be 40,000 jobs coming into southeastern Minnesota, helping to provide high-quality health care for not just Minnesota, but the world. And so it's not all doom and gloom in Minnesota, as some might say, and taxes are part of the business and climate that we have, but workforce and all of this other are part of the equation that we have to take into consideration. And I look at what we're working on in the tax conference committee this year. I'm pretty excited about it. I mentioned these 5 projects, and in addition to that, we're going to strengthen the angel investor credit. We're looking at figuring out there's a number of interests in bringing data centers to Minnesota. Data centers, these are high energy computer places, a lot of heat generated. We're a colder climate, so we've got some advantages there. So we're trying to figure out to see if we can see expansions in those areas. So there are some areas that we need to be addressed, but there are some bright spots going on in Minnesota also.
It isn't all about what Minnesota can do either. Medtronic, I understand, has had some layoffs now, and that's a result of that tax that's part of the Affordable Health Plan. And so sometimes the federal government does things that actually set us back here a little bit with some of our major employers. And in my opinion, that should never have happened. But to fix it now is really difficult.
And we'll have to invite our viewers to call their congressmen and senators about that problem, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yep.
A viewer from Elizabeth. We've actually had this question from 2 or 3 people. I haven't asked it, but it's come up often enough now that even though it's very specific, I am going to run it by the panel and see if there's any legislative movement or action on this. This viewer from Elizabeth is concerned about why doesn't state law require the DNR to use identifying emblems on their law enforcement, on their vehicles like police and highway patrol and other things. Has this been an issue that any of you have heard about or people have talked to you about?
I can't say. I usually I run into the DNR.
No one has raised that to me, no.
Pretty identified to me. But
I do have a DNR headquarters in Fergus Falls. Did you say Elizabeth?
That's what it says.
Well,
In your district.
my district.
Well, we'll invite that viewer to call Representative Norris and get that question addressed. All right, we have several viewers who are concerned about where we're at in the Viking Stadium and whether or not there's going to be any action on that in this session. Anybody want to take a run at that?
That's up to the Senate.
Well, the House actually has a provision in its tax bill to take part of the institute a memorabilia tax, and also I think there's a provision, sales tax on sweets, et cetera, and they dedicated that money to the stadium. The Senate has the memorabilia tax. We didn't dedicate it. We thought we'd kind of see where it goes. I think there's some interest in seeing how far this electronic link bingo does. There's some potential growth there. The real issue here is the legislature a year ago passed the bill. The governor signed it. There were 3 partners in that agreement: the city, the Vikings, and the state. And the city has fulfilled their part of the bargain. The Vikings have fulfilled their part of the bargain. And because the funding mechanism that came out of the legislature isn't appearing to be adequate, the state doesn't appear to be able to uphold his part of the bargain. I didn't support the funding mechanism that was used then. The Senate Tax Committee under Senator Ortman actually had a better funding mechanism where users of the facility were more involved in the payment. It would have been a more stable funding stream. That did not survive the process. But as far as whether there's going to be additional money for the stadium, I think it's unknown at this point. But there are things being worked on if we have to do something that could come about. I think the memorabilia tax would be possible part of that.
Safe to say the stadium is moving forward, though.
The stadium is moving forward, yes.
All right, we have a question from Clearbook. A viewer wants us to revisit the issue of the legacy money, and this viewer is concerned that maybe there's an effort being made to transfer some of the legacy money from rural areas to metro areas. Since it's Clearbrook, we'll pick on you, Senator Skoye. You want to address that question? I know that's a concern that others have raised.
Yeah, well, I don't know the details of what's going on in the House bill. I think most of the controversy is in the House bill with regard to that. The Senate bill is going to track pretty close to what the recommendations out of the Citizens Council are, the Lessard-Sampson, et cetera. I don't know of any initiatives within the Senate bill. Maybe Bill might know something where they would be doing something untoward with regard to moving money from one part of the state to the other. We always try to reach a pretty good geographic balance, but with some of the Lessard-Sampson stuff, and you probably can find examples where you can do habitat development in the metropolitan area, but the vast majority of that type of land is out and about in the state, so that's where the majority of the money probably would be spent.
Well, Rod's right. I think there was some discussion. There were a few changes as it relates to some of the park and lands as far as the metro-rural split that is occurring. And of course, being the newbie here, I can't really give you a lot of history about what was happening there. But I think it's safe to say that those geographic battles do rear their head every once in a while in the different issues that come up, especially at committee time. So,
Representative Nornes, we discussed this issue before you joined us. Maybe you'd want to weigh in on the question of
I haven't been very involved all along with this. I've heard a lot from my constituents, and I think that's the main concern that most of them have is how it gets divided, and we're always, I guess the general feeling is we're on the short end most of the time. So I think they're just concerned that isn't going to happen this time, that we do get our fair share of those funds.
Well, actually, I think Bill touched on it. Probably the hottest button is the regional parks versus the metro regional parks. And I think there was a recommendation, and I can't remember if it was a 40-40-20 split or something like that.
That's what it was.
I do want to say, and this is a little contrary, is that we are state legislatures, and we're there representing the state. And the one area that has been shorted a little bit is the state park system. And, that used to receive a little more of that legacy park money, and that's been reduced. I have Lake Itasca State Park in my district, and I have concerns. I want to make sure we keep these state parks good and strong. Lake Itasca is certainly a jewel of the state park system, and nobody would want to see that not have good maintenance and good programming.
Now you've got the LaSalle recreational area there too. That's part of the state park system.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful area. I've been up there.
One of the deepest lakes in the state.
Amazing. I didn't know that until I got there. And
gorgeous.
They were warning us not
So
to go
where is
swimming.
that? LaSalle, help me with the geography of that.
It's just north of the Itasca State Park, kind of between Bemidji and the park. Actually, it's about, I suppose, 5 miles west of Besaida. If anybody's ever been to the Besaida Bar and Grill, they got the best prime
North
rib.
of Bemidji probably helps us as much as we're going to get here, I suspect.
They got the best prime rib you can get on the weekend. So if
I
you're
think
in the
it's
area,
close enough to the state park, though, that they hope to sometime connect it with a bike trail or something.
I think there's a proposal to have, there's going to be a Heartland spur that comes off the Heartland Bike Trail from Park Rapids, go up to the park. We're going to hope to hook it into LaSalle. I'd like to go west and then come down to the Heartland again over by Moorhead somewhere, so I'll put a loop in there.
Yeah, I would agree that if there's money to be spent, it should go to the state parks. It's a very good investment.
Viewer from Brainerd wants to talk about higher education, concerned about a number of administrators at the university and compensation issues. Caller suggests that universities should be audited because they're state employers. Of course, the issue is broader than that. It's a higher education question, across the system. Let's pick on you, Representative Dorholt.
Sure.
You've got a major state university in your district. Talk a little bit about higher education funding, and I think maybe respond to the viewer's concern, which I think will fit broadly under the category of accountability, administrative issues.
Well, I think, he asked both Bud and I are on higher ed in the House, and he asked for an audit, and I would say that what the House committee did to the University of Minnesota and MnSCU this year was force them to do their own self-audit. And from what I understand, it's been decades since MnSCU and the University of Minnesota has been asked to provide this intensity on the amount of the numbers, where those dollars are going. And they got the message. I think the U in both MnSCU just a couple weeks ago voluntarily decided to drop their bonus program. The Kaler instituted a study which
That'd be President Kaler of the University of Minnesota.
President Kaler of the U of M.
Minnesota.
They instituted a study to address the overhead of the amount of administrators. But it has been a problem, with tuition skyrocketing, and those pay issues have been very concerning. But I think it's been amazing. It's been quite an experience on the committee in the House to really, I would say, take to task Minsky and the U of M. They have not had an easy time in our committee at all this year.
Representative Norris?
Well, I would agree with that. We spent a lot of time with both systems, and they had to find almost every penny that they had and account for it. As far as the salaries and so forth, I guess I do believe that there is competition out there, even in higher education, for the right staff and the qualified personnel. I think so. Part of it, I think, you can justify, because if they're not going to get paid here, they're going to go someplace else, and so you want to keep the best that you can. But maybe some would argue we have too many, on and on, and so I think the accountability has been one of the major things that the committee has accomplished. Because when you look at our bill, doesn't contain much. It funds the university, Minsky, and the grant program, and that's kind of it. And it just varies between the House and Senate as far as how much. Other than that, that's it. And so I think it's been an interesting year in higher education, just because of I remember testimony from previous administrators telling, when we were cutting, and we did that quite often for a while, how we were destroying the university, or they were on the brink, they were on the tipping point, all of these words that bring up images of the place just, going into the drink. Finding how much money they've been spending in the meantime, was kind of the rude awakening that we got. So,
Senator Skoye, any thoughts on this?
Sure. I'm going to take a little different tact on this, and part of this, of course, we want our administrators to be efficient and do as good a job as they can, and not be wasteful of the money. We don't want a high percentage of administrators per educators, but part of this is driven by this ever-increasing tuition costs that we've had in the state the last 14 to 15 years. I mean, the tuition has gone up a lot. When I first came in the legislature in 1999, the state of Minnesota paid 67% of the cost of attending a state college or university in the state. Today, that's around 40%. So you take that 27% of the money, the cost of educating a kid, take it out of what the state's paying the universities, and you just transferred all of that onto tuition, because that's where the money got made up. And so when people want to figure out why tuition's going up so much, a big part of it is because the state's backed off on their commitment to the institutions. And the institutions, the way they raise money when the state doesn't provide the resources, is they increase tuition. Now, that drives the debate about whether administrators are being efficient and are being overpaid. And, we can go off and talk about football coach buyouts and all kinds of things that aren't good and should never have happened. But we really need to kind of look at ourselves when we are concerned about tuition, because the legislature and the governors, up until now, Governor Dayton is increased for higher ed significantly. But we really have not done a good job of keeping tuition down for our students. Minnesota now is leading the nation in the amount of debt that students carry when they graduate from these higher ed institutions. And, number one is good to be good sometimes, but that's not a good place to be. And it's going to take a number of years and a major commitment by the legislature and the governor to turn that around. And, we're heading off into this global knowledge-based economy. I think it's imperative that we turn that around.
The one thing that we have done when we were in a situation where we weren't able to provide the funding we'd like to have, we did increase the state grant program somewhat to offset the higher tuition. So, it helped.
Senator Weber, very briefly.
Well, and In our higher education finance bill, that is one of the omnibus bills I have voted for. Some people have told me as a member of the minority, you really shouldn't vote for any of those bills. And I said, no, I have a rationale behind what I'm doing, and we think it was at 80 million, I think, increases for MnSCU and the University of Minnesota in the Senate bill, and there were provisions made again for some more stringent oversight. I voted for some amendments on the floor to actually strengthen that somewhat more. That didn't happen, but I still voted for it. I think we needed to get our funding back to a point where we were some years ago, and also try to make it more possible for our young people to get there and afford the tuition.
There's also 80 million in state grant in the Senate bill this year. And the thing about the state grant is that's the mechanism where you can actually get at the debt that students carry, because that is a financial package that's based on their ability to pay their tuition. It's really a good program.
A viewer from that famous Minnesota town, unknown community, wants to know about the Mayo Clinic expansion. This viewer is very supportive of it, thinks it's important, wants to know what its status is. Can somebody help us with the status of it, changes that have been made and so forth?
It's in both the House and the Senate bill. There are some differences we're going to have to resolve. The House bill has more control of the project going to the city of Rochester. The bonds would be let by the city of Rochester. In the Senate, we're taking a little different tact. We're trying to give a little more control to an authority that would have state and local people on there. We think because there's state money going into it, the state needs to be part of that, more a part of that discussion. My expectation is that that will pass and become law this year. I hope that Rochester is able to grow as fast as Mayo Clinic is down there. We have done a lot of changes to the original proposal and really strengthen it up, and I think it does a good job of providing infrastructure aid to Rochester while protecting the taxpayers of Minnesota.
Just have a few seconds left. Representative Nornes, would you agree with that outlook?
Basically, I guess I haven't been that involved in that either, but anything, if we can do something for anybody in the state of Minnesota that's employing people, I mean, let's do it.
Senator Weber, very quickly.
It's a good project. I would have liked to have seen that to be a standalone bill. I think it was important enough to be a standalone bill. Obviously, I voted against Rod's tax bill, in which that was located. But as the project itself, it's a tremendous project for Rochester and for the entire state.
5 seconds.
It's exciting.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us. Invite you to all come back next week and the weeks that follow. We'll see you by the end of May.
There's much more about your legislators online at pioneer.org. Find out more about the history of the program, who's been a guest, and watch all our past episodes. There's also a photo gallery, informative links, and much more. You can also get involved and stay in touch by following us on Twitter and join the discussion on our Facebook page. Thank you for watching Your Legislators. Your Legislators is made possible in part by the generous financial support of MAPE members, making Minnesota clean waters, safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans. Minnesota Farmers Union, committed to helping develop and strengthen Minnesota rural communities since 1929. On the web at mfu.org.